you actually went to Sequoia and you pitched roll-off BOFA?
Yes. We showed up at Sequoia. I decided to delete a third of my deck. This is literally 10 minutes before roll-off comes in. I delete a third of my deck. Google, what's roll-off's favorite drink?
Edward, welcome to the Imagine AI podcast.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
How are you doing today?
Great.
I'm so excited to have you here because you're the first guest of the Imagine AI podcast. So to recap a little bit of what we're doing at Imagine AI is kind of building this podcast off of this in-person event that's happening in Las Vegas at the end of March. And it's going to be getting all of the AI creators, builders, all together at the new Fontainebleau Hotel in Las Vegas. So it's going to be a nice event. And on this podcast, I want to talk with the leading AI startups and builders, and you are one of them. You're building an amazing product, PodcastAI. Could you tell us a little bit about what your product is?
Yeah, so PodcastAI is, our mission is to automate podcasting. So from A to Z. Right now, what we have today is, if you look at podcasting, there's really these 5 buckets, pre-production, production, post-production, promotion, and then let's call it profit, meaning all the monetization. So we start at post-production. That means you've recorded your episode, it's done, it's edited, you're ready to go. You have an MP3 or you have an MP4, an audio or video file. You drop it into PodcastAI, and we automate the creation of descriptions, titles, chapters, key points. We automatically generate the feed and put you out there. We generate, viral moments and social posts that go with those viral moments automatically, the full transcript. And we also generate a full website for your show. So it's really, our mission statement is automating everything, and that's what we're working on.
Oh man, as somebody that's launching a podcast, that sounds really intriguing, and we're gonna have to talk more about that. But first, I want to get into the founding story of the podcast, because for me, that's how I got you on my radar. Is that you made an AI podcast of the besties of the All In podcast? Can you tell us about that story? What gave you the idea, and what did you actually do?
Yeah, so at the time, this was maybe February or March. Probably February. I was hanging out with my fiance at her mother's house, on the weekends, and I realized, it wasn't cutting it. I needed a better computer to really be able to do some work over the weekend. I got the new M2 MacBook Air, and then once I had the firepower, I started playing around with some AI models, and I started playing around with text-to-speech, meaning actually turning words into audio in someone's voice. And I had been introduced recently to the All In podcast. And so I started playing around first with David Sax's voice and then the others. And I realized it kind of clicked. I could actually do a parody of the All In podcast. And one of the episodes around then, it was, I think, 117, the show opening was them talking about how, you're going to get replaced by an AI, Sax. No, you, Jason, you're going to get replaced by an AI. Watch out. And so that's basically the premise. They're the 4 of them reborn as AIs. It's done using their voices. And, I put out episode 1 on Twitter, and David Sachs liked it, I think, and then immediately got retweeted by This Week in Startups, like the actual account. So that was Nick. And then Jason retweeted it, and it just went super viral. It was amazing.
No, it was hilarious to watch because it was the besties. It sounded like them. It was their voice, and they were joking around, and it was a hilarious script. And that was the big question, actually, is this, are these AI models like just talking with each other on their own, free will, or was it something else?
Yeah. So we ended up putting out 6 episodes in total, and people were asking, like, is this real? And it was almost this like little experiment, like who thinks it's real, who doesn't. And the answer is I was scripting the show. And as a fan by then, I knew them enough that I could do something that really did feel like it was them. But a lot of people are like, what's the GitHub repo? You have to publish this.
Yeah.
But, me and my co-founder, Sean, we realized at that time, we were like, if you were to actually train an LLM on past transcripts, combined with the ability to do the voices, you probably could do this, and kind of the analogy, it's like, imagine you're like in 1895 and, you see all the parts to make a car, right? They all exist by 1985, like the gasoline engine, the steering wheel, the wheels, like the actual cart part of a car, like all that exists. Someone just has to put it together. So that's kind of what brought us to Podcast AI. It's like, let's actually make this real. And, one of the things Podcast AI does actually, which is the first step towards this, is you can generate an entire ad read. So you basically just say, this is the sponsor name. You just give it a very basic idea for the ad and the call to action, maybe like one or two lines. You select the reader, one of the hosts, and it will generate a 2-minute ad read in their voice. And it actually makes a lot of sense. And you can tell it's like based on them actually.
Wow. Yeah. It was incredible. And I was like caught up in that, like, this is like AI, like, oh my God, this like breakthrough. And I think you did a good job of like keeping the curtain there for as long as possible, like not revealing that, it was actually you that was kind of thinking of and writing the script. But I mean, the voices were so spot on that, it was still really impressive even after finding out that it was written. So, this got you the attention of the besties. And what made you decide to go down the Founder University road with Jason?
So it's a few things. So Sean, my co-founder, and I, we had started a startup late 2019, creator economy type thing. But at the time it was counter trend. We weren't really, at the time, both in Toronto, so not really in the Silicon Valley system. And so, we really cut our teeth in terms of building companies on that. But when all the AI stuff started happening, it just felt like, okay, we have to do something here. This is like 30 years ago when, the internet was being created, in terms of mass appeal. And, we were just too young by this much to be part of it. But, this kind of opportunity comes once every 30 years, I think, or 25 years. And we wanted to do something with AI, obviously. And when you're a second-time founder, there's a saying, which is, second-time founders know that it's all about distribution. And the fact that the AI All-In podcast now have this, distribution mechanism, we realized, let's actually make this. Like, the people that are asking, is this real? Let's actually do that. So we found the name PodcastAI.com. We bought it.
And what was that, like $5, or it was more expensive? Like, they're bidding more for it?
It was $10,000.
Oh, wow.
I don't mind saying. But, when we saw the name,
it's a good AI. I mean, it's good brand.
You can't do better than that. PodcastAI.com.
With the .com too, yeah.
Yeah, and so nice. And we're Podcast AI Inc. And when we had started doing this AI All-In podcast, we were having lots of DMs coming in. So I was getting DMs from relatively well-known people and people also in Silicon Valley and stuff like that, complimenting it. And one of the people actually that sent me a DM was Presh, who along with Kelly is part of Jason's launch, which is his venture fund. And so, I had gotten a compliment on the AI All-In. And, I had noticed a tweet about Founder U and this new cohort, the 5th cohort of it. And so I asked Presh, hey, should I apply? And he was like, hell yes, apply. So we got in. And Founder U is just amazing. It's this program.
First, can you break down what is Founder U and what is the program?
So Jason has Launch, which is his investment fund. And he has an accelerator. An accelerator is sort of like Y Combinator. So it's meant for companies to come in and grow and raise and do all this stuff, find product market fit. But he also has this on-ramp program to the Launch Accelerator, which is called Founder U. And it's something like 12 weeks or 14 weeks. The model is it costs $500 to apply. And then upon graduation, they reimburse the $500. So the $500, and they explain this. It's something that once they did that, and the graduation rate is like in the high 90s. Wow. It's meant to make people take it seriously and really go through it, which they should. I mean, it's such an amazing opportunity. So it's this on ramp, and you just come in with a co-founder and an idea, and some evidence that you're able to execute. And once you're in, there's this cohort that you're part of, this community, and you're going through this material that's really teaching you the stuff that you need to be doing to actually set up your company and all this stuff. And what they do is they invest $25,000 in about, their target is 10% of the companies. And for them, the way they explain it is that's kind of a bookmark into the companies. And what they do is their winners, the companies that do well that they did that with, then they'll invite those companies, like really the cream of the crop, into the Launch Accelerator. So we incorporated in April, we got in, it started in May, we started building, and Kelly and Presh, we had a meeting with them, and they kind of sprung it on us that they wanted to invest $25,000. So that was really cool.
Wow.
That was, a lot of validation for what we were doing, which was really amazing.
And that was at the end of the program?
It was towards the end. I mean, they do it throughout the program, but it was closer towards the end. But that was first of all really amazing. And once you're part of that, what they'll do is they'll keep giving you these opportunities, right? So we got invited to a dim sum dinner in New York to pitch investors. We went. We were first to pitch, and it went really well. And pretty soon after that, Jackie, who runs the Launch Accelerator, which is the analog to Y Combinator, invited us into LA30, which is the 30th cohort of the Launch Accelerator. And every cohort is 7 companies that they've picked to get a $100,000 follow-on investment. Some companies hadn't been in Founder U, some went straight into the accelerator, but we had done Founder U. So, we got the 25 and then the 100. And we've been part of the Launch Accelerator since, I guess it started in October, and it's been great.
Yeah. So you're currently in the Launch Accelerator?
Yeah.
All right. And so I gotta get to the story because you told me it. You told me that you met Rotha
Roloff
Botha, right?
Yeah.
Botha. All right. And so you guys tell me the story because you teased it a little bit. So you actually went to Sequoia and you pitched Roloff Botha?
Yes. So okay, let's set it up. So first of all, for people that don't know, Sequoia is, they were the first VC check into Apple, into YouTube. In fact, Roloff is the one who got YouTube. And Sequoia, they're just the, they're the top, they're the legendary firm, Figma, WhatsApp, amazing logos, you have to say. And Roloff is the head of Sequoia. So Jason is, friends with them. He was a Sequoia scout.
Yeah. Sequoia scout.
Exactly. So he was bringing companies to Sequoia. So very good relationship there. So the opportunity was bringing, the companies of our cohort to Sequoia. So a bit of a pilgrimage, and pitching to Roloff and Roloff and Stephanie, I should say, the two people of the team. And yeah, so this was like last week.
Last week. Wow.
Last
week.
You
went to the Sequoia headquarters.
And yeah, it's just such an amazing opportunity, right? And the dream is to be able to pitch Sequoia. So the only 6 companies were there. One of them couldn't make it because the founder's in Macedonia. We ended up being first to pitch, and I pulled a bit of a stunt. So part of what the Launch Accelerator does is it teaches you to really pitch really well and concisely. So your pitch becomes 3 minutes, you have your deck, you hone it in, and you're pitching it every week to new groups of investors. So it's kind of like the training wheels. And you get really good at the 3 minutes. So we're 10 minutes before Roloff is coming in. We're sitting in that room, and I basically delete the last third of my deck, so 1 minute. And I had loaded in Roloff's podcast. So Roloff has a podcast called Crucible Moments that he does for Sequoia. And so I loaded it into our system along with his voice because I figured maybe there'd be an opportunity to demo. So I just Google, what's Roloff's favorite drink? Roloff Botha's favorite drink. And I get this 13-year-old Quora article. And, the question in the article is, what's a good South African wine? So Roloff's answer is, go to African Hut or Hunt, I forget.com, and you'll find a really good South African wine. So I go there, as 13-year-old reply. I go there, I find a wine that looks good. I don't know if it's good, but it just seems good. I think it's called like Konotop Pinotage or something like this. And I go into our ad regenerator. So we have this ad regenerator. I put the name of the wine. I say, investing is hard. Relax with a nice South African wine. Use code BOTHA at checkout for 10% off. And I select Roloff as the reader. 60 seconds, generate. And I get this MP3. I didn't really have a chance to kind of like preview listen to it. So, I just cold generate it. And so anyways, we're first to pitch. One of the other companies was supposed to be first, but the actual CEO wasn't able to make it that day. So it was the CTO, and it was his first time pitching. So Jackie was like, okay, you can go last and we'll give you a chance to like kind of practice a little bit, because that was maybe a little, that's a lot, right? Your first pitch is to Roloff. That was pretty cool, actually. But so we became first to pitch. And I always like, people are like, oh, you're first, that's like stressful. It's like, no, I want to be first or last. I don't want to be like stuck in the middle. I want to make the last impression or the first impression. So it was perfect being first. And, go through just like usual. And then when we hit where I have my deleted go-to-market and roadmap slides, I then say, hey, let me give you a demo. So I pull up the interface where I put all that stuff, and then I hit play. And they're listening. Everybody's listening. I don't even think Jason knew about the ability to do this. And it's playing, and everybody's like, holy smokes. And, Roloff is like hearing himself do a sponsor ad read for Crucible Moments about a South African wine. So we kind of took the show there. And towards the end, what Jason does in the Accelerator is he always makes the VCs that we're pitching, or whoever we're pitching, score the companies. And needless to say, we did incredibly well. I'll just put it that way. And it was amazing. And Roloff, I was able to email him, and he put me in touch with his head of content. So we're gonna have a conversation probably next week or after.
Wow, that's so cool. And that was just a week ago. You're probably still on cloud 9 from that.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of news happening, right? It's like Adobe and Figma, that thing. But yeah, just in parentheses, like I know Sequoia, they like either keeping them private or going public, but they don't like when the companies, it seems to me at least, get bought out, kind of like YouTube did. Mm-hmm. So, my guess is they're probably fine with the Figma news, but
yeah, well, I read news that all of the Adobe has to pay $1 billion to Figma because the deal didn't go through, and that's already 3 times the amount of money that VCs that they've raised. They've raised like $330 million from VCs, and then the cancellation fee was $1 billion. So
that's your is right there.
Sitting pretty well right now.
I think so.
That's amazing. So what was Roloff's, him hearing his own voice, what was his reaction like? I mean, I just, as an investor, like a VC investor hearing that, I kid, that's just like you pull out the ace of spades or something, and it's just such a magic trick.
Yeah, I'm actually used to it in customer demos. Everybody has that moment. There's a few aha moments, like when we show that, generates this whole website for you. When I show that your audience can have like a Q&A chat with the AI host, or when I'm showing the ad regenerator, or, oh, you used to take 20 minutes to do your chapters, let's click a button. There's a few aha moments like that, but definitely hearing your own voice and it actually being informed in the sense of knowing who it is, like you. It's based on your bio and the show and everything. That's one of the big ones. And so I hadn't done it in an actual pitch meeting yet.
Yeah.
So that was the first time. But the reaction is kind of universal, really. It's like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll like prepare people. I'll be like, have you ever seen the show Westworld? And because when we upload the voice, actually, there's like this little preview, and it has the host kind of say something like, born from the blah, 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 like, I am now a being, or something like this, right? So it's like a very Westworld moment. So it's pretty cool.
That's the best pilot of any show, I think, was Westworld. I'm just incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure we cover our bases here. So going back to Founder University, what were like the top 3 things that you took away from Founder University?
Yeah, so essentially, some of this is common with other accelerators and things like, so really good startup advice is get your MVP done, launch. So that's one of the big things. So if you're in Y Combinator, a big focus is launching. The second thing that's maybe in common with those things is you're part of a larger cohort of people. And these are self-selected people for people to execute, right? Doers. It's easy to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to build a company. I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to do that. There's a difference between that and actually taking the steps. And, maybe the Keith Rabois analogy is these people are more likely to be barrels than ammo, because you have to be able to actually do something from A to Z, right? Nobody's going to tell you, oh, now do this, now do this, now do this. Now, you'll get amazing advice for any question. And actually, you get plugged into a community. So there's a Slack channel for everybody in the program. So there's a lot of help between the different companies and sort of shared knowledge. But basically, the key from Founder U is execution, launch, have amazing product, get customers. It's all about that. It's about execution, really.
That's great. Nobody's going to hold your hand. I can't imagine Jason holding anybody's hand on their way to startup glory.
I mean, he is incredibly helpful. Like, what he'll do is kind of like when he's moderating, he kind of analogizes it to, look, I passed you the ball. Now you make the shot. It's, sometimes he'll pass the ball and it's like, wow. Right. So, putting you in front of a big podcaster, stuff like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched some of those public pitches, actually. Like, he'll just like live stream them. And like, I was watching one, and it was like 30 people giving their pitch. And then I think it was him and Molly at the time, they like said who they thought did best of like the last 5 or which one impressed them the most. And I mean, just that practice to do it in front of people and that repetition and getting the at-bats is so important for founders to the pitching process.
Yeah.
Any other takeaways that you can think of from your time at Founder University?
It's really about being in the ecosystem. So, this is something that affected me. I don't know about other people, but being in Toronto, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, you're just out of network for Silicon Valley. And there's this really good clip that Mark Andreessen, talking to, might have been 60 Minutes or something like this. But anyways, the presenter or announcer, he asks Mark, he's like, so, how do people get to pitch you? How do you decide who to invest in? And Mark's answer was kind of interesting, actually very interesting, but at the time, and I had seen this like 2.5 years ago, I didn't understand it. I understood the words literally, like speaking English. Anybody can understand the words, but it actually takes a little while for you to actually understand what he's saying. So, Mark Andreessen, he goes, well, every year there's about 4,000 venture qualified deals out there, companies, and 2,000 of which that we see through our internal deal flow, 200 of which will get funded, 15 of which will be successful, 2 of which will make a portfolio. So, okay, at the time, I hear that 4,000, and they look at half of them, okay, and some of them will be successful. But what he's actually saying is there's 4,000 venture qualified potential deals out there. Venture qualified means you went through an accelerator, like a launch accelerator or YC, and there's a few other tech stars. That's one way to get venture qualified. The other way is you're, the ex-head of whatever at Facebook, right? That's one way to get venture qualified. And the other way is, I have this exit from my previous startup that was super successful. Yeah, of course, that's another way to get venture qualified. But if you don't tick one of those three boxes, they're not really going to take a look at you. And sort of the analogy that I would apply is, so my father's from France, actually both my parents, but my dad told me a story. This is from the 70s, and there was high unemployment in France, and some Parisian post office had one job opening, and there was a line around the post office for this one spot, hundreds and hundreds of people in the lineup. And the way that they decided who to give the job to is they basically administered an extremely high level math test, right? And math has nothing to do with your ability to be a mailman or a postal office worker. But when you have such an imbalance between, the number of spots and the demand, you have to find some way to filter. And so for the VCs, they need a way to filter. And yeah, it's kind of unfair if you're out of network, but you kind of need to venture qualify yourself. You need to be one of those 4,000. But it's worse than that, because the next part of that quote is 2,000 of which we see through our internal deal flow. That means they're just looking at half of those that are actually being warmly referred to them by SV Angels, which is their preferred angels partner. And SV Angels, there's no way to directly apply. You actually have to get a warm referral to SV Angels. And that's part of the test. Sometimes they say, the founder has to prove himself by, getting that referral up, which people don't like to hear, because it's, you have to figure it out, and it's not necessarily easy. But there just needs to be some sort of a filter, right? So even of the 4,000 that are venture qualified, they're just looking at half of them that had a warm referral. And then 200 will get funded. What does that mean? That means across all the top tier VCs, they're going to fund 200 companies. Like Sequoia's funding maybe 15 to 20 companies a year, right? It's not a ton. And of those 200, 15 will be successes, and 2 of them will be unicorns that, make the portfolio of whatever fund they're in. So that, realizing that was the thing that kind of made me realize, wow, we need to get ourselves venture qualified once I understood that. And, Founder U, to bring it back to Founder U, that's how you venture qualify yourself. Build in public, kind of like what we did. Essentially, the AI All-In podcast was a way to show what we could do in public. And that's what got us into Founder U. And so if you can actually do that, that's the on-ramp. Mm-hmm. And they'll pick the winners, meaning the people that impress them the most, to actually do the follow-on. But the point is, in terms of having an opportunity to show what you can do, it's amazing. Founder U is absolutely amazing. Y Combinator, it's a black box. They accept obviously less than 1% of people, and there's a ton of applications. And, you get no feedback about, why you may or may not have been taken in. It's just great that there's these other accelerators that are being built around.
No, I think that's what I like about Jason the most, is how much of an open book he is. And you can really tell that he cares about people, and he cares about the people starting off, and people, because he was there too, and, he wants to see people succeed, but he knows that they've gotta want it too. And it's just really inspiring.
100%.
So I have, being venture qualified, so that made me think of a new question of how big is the TAM, the total accessible market for your product? Where do you see people investing in your company now? I mean, they're going to have to get 100x, 1000x to return, or they're expecting the valuation to go up a huge amount. And I'm just wondering, if you could dive into that a little bit of just the podcast economics, podcast ecosystem of, I don't know, how much money there is to be that's being spent and how much to be made.
So podcasting is interesting. There's about 5 million podcasts out there, 70 million episodes, almost 500 million listeners that listen to podcasts. And the growth of podcasting is 30% year over year. So compounding until 2029, it's going to be $100 billion market.
Wow.
And the other thing you have to realize is YouTubers, people that have a YouTube channel, that's quite analogous to a podcast. In fact, some of our customers are YouTubers who, this one example, French podcaster, his assistant uses our system to generate the chapters and put them in the YouTube descriptions. And, I showed him that we can actually generate a show website for him. So he uses that. And he was looking at the, thisweekinstartups.com, which we also power. And he was seeing how they had, distribution links to Apple Podcasts and to Spotify. And so he's saying, I always wish I could have my show as a podcast on those platforms, but I just don't have the time, and my assistant doesn't have the time. And so I told him, hey, no problem. We can just make PodcastAI generate a feed for you. So we did that, and we submitted the feed to Apple and Spotify. And so he is automatically, just by his assistant using us for those chapters, he automatically has his website fully generated, and he's automatically on all the podcasting platforms. So there's not only just the TAM of podcasting itself, it's what's happening with podcasting. A lot of YouTube is essentially analogous to podcasting and are great customers for us. And, if you think about education, right? A professor is pretty analogous to a host. A course is analogous to a show. A lesson is analogous to an episode. And, just imagine in education, being able to have that show website, which is essentially the course website, and being able to chat, essentially a Q&A with an AI version of the professor about the lesson. So there's that on top of it. And then finally, like going back to Westworld, our AI hosts, it's a bunch of different models working together, but essentially it has the voice of the host, the LLM, meaning the actual natural language processing. It's trained on past transcripts, so it speaks like the host. And part of the process of uploading something to PodcastAI is it memorizes the episode. It essentially puts every paragraph of the transcript into a vector database. And what that means is that the AI hosts can have access to everything in the transcript as a memory based on the context of what they're talking about. So you can very much imagine us being able to give these AI hosts email accounts, put them on company Slacks. You could give them job titles, and they could maintain memories about what they're doing, and they could actually become workers. So in terms of what we're doing and where we're going, I just think the TAM is just insane.
Yeah, that's great. And that's actually, for me, I don't actually care that much about the audio side of things. Like, I care about the video, and then I don't like, is your software right now, your program, like I could upload my video version of the podcast, and does it get just converted to audio and put on RSS feeds?
Correct. So automatically you just drop in your file. The audio is what goes on the RSS feeds for the podcast. We're going to eventually have push to YouTube. So essentially your workflow will be, you finish your episode, you drop it into PodcastAI, goes off to the podcast automatically. It goes off to YouTube automatically. One of our customers actually asked for automating even all the steps for all the generations. Mm-hmm. So you can actually imagine, you drop it in, it does the description, the key points, the chapters, creates viral moments, creates social media posts for those viral moments, and then schedules them off to all the social media accounts. So essentially, you're done recording, drop it, you walk away.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's the future right there. It's just getting there. What's your GPU usage? Like, where do you have your GPUs, and how does that work?
So for some things, we're using our own models. And obviously everything in AI right now is kind of based on open source models. So we're doing some of that. We're using DigitalOcean as our host provider. Some people use AWS. There's a bunch of different host providers, and they're all roughly equivalent. I'd say AWS is way more complicated, obviously. So we decided to sort of abstract more things and use something that's easier to use for us. But like we're using the best AI models for everything we're doing. So we have APIs that we hit for transcription that are best of class, for LLMs, OpenAI, and also for text to speech. So where we see the market going is all of the models and LLMs, they're all going to get really damn good really quick. And, best in class is going to matter less because the marginal return on quote unquote best is just going to become infinitesimal. And so for us, the key right now is just using whatever's best in class. So for example, using GPT-4 is key for us because that's really the best model. And, but obviously all the open source models are going to catch up pretty soon. And so we'll just always be using whatever is the best and gives the best result for the customers.
And where do you know that it's the best? How do you stay up to date on what's the best in this community?
Yeah, so there's a few ways we kind of benchmark things. So we have a few set things that we make it so that it's easy for us to test on the various models when they come out. Mm-hmm. We stay up to date, frankly, just through X or Twitter, just seeing what's the new stuff coming out there. And I mean, so far OpenAI is the best. That's sort of indisputable for LLMs at least. And we're just sticking to whatever is best in class.
That's amazing. Okay, I think we just have one more thing to get to, and that's when we first talked after your tweet went viral, we had a conversation, and you kind of gave me the future plans of where your product could go for fans of the All In podcast. What can fans of the All In podcast expect with your product in the future?
Yeah, so with PodcastAI, because we have all the transcripts for a podcast, we actually have the timestamp of every single word, and a word can be turned into a phoneme and a voiceme, meaning essentially how the mouth moves with the word. And so you can imagine putting on Apple's Vision Pro or any VR system and actually being at the table with the four besties, let's say if we're talking about All In, and with the new Gaussian splatter tools, we'll be able to actually create these really amazing models pretty fast. And so imagine you put this thing in, you're at the poker table with the four of them, you actually feel like you're there, and they are essentially reenacting the podcast episode and looking at the right person, because we can actually determine that, and really enacting the podcast.
The same podcast. It's going to be the same, script. It's just going to be run through your program, and then the viewer, the fan, will be able to watch it in VR and actually be there at the table.
Be at the table.
Be at the table with the besties as they, do the podcast, but they're actually interacting with each other, yelling at each other. That's insane. That sounds so cool. I would, for me, I always watch it on YouTube. I think it's, way better than just listening to the audio. But the VR sounds way better than the YouTube. That sounds amazing.
And all you need is actually the audio to do that. But it gets better than that. Right now we have on our show portals that we generate those websites, you have the ability to chat with the AI hosts. And so we can actually integrate that so that they're having the podcast and you can interrupt and say, hey, what about this? They'll turn towards you and go back and forth with you. And then you can just say, okay, carry on. And they'll just continue doing the episode.
So you can just kind of interrupt the podcast and be like, hey, Chamath, didn't you say something different last week? And he would turn to you and be like, no, that's not what I said. And and you just
he would have
with them.
Correct, and he would have the perfect recall. And the beauty of it is this is all happening virtually. You just say resume, and it's really like you're there.
Wow. Yeah, you could have them if they touched on Freeberg touched on a topic, briefly, but you wanted to hear more, and you could ask him more. And because there's such a bank of All In content and all of his thoughts on previous, so many previous topics are there in the library, he'd be able to tell you. what he thinks.
Right. But
Wow.
part of the premise of the company is that podcasts are the best bootloader for doing these AI hosts, because in what other context do you have just hours and hours and hours and hours of people talking extemporaneously about various topics? So, if we're talking about doing a Westworld, well, this is it. And essentially what we're describing with this thing, it's more analogous, I would say, to the Star Trek holodeck. In fact, very analogous to it. So yeah, it's just going to be amazing what we're going to be doing very shortly.
Wait, so can you expand on that? So how is it like the Star Trek holodeck?
Well, the holodeck is essentially you walk into this area of the ship, and actually the way the holodeck works in Star Trek lore is that technically the persons are being teleported, and you have particle beams basically creating the people in physically. But essentially what you're doing is, you could be on the holodeck and talking to Albert Einstein and having a conversation with him. Well, if you put on Apple's VR and you're sitting at a table with, 3D models of the besties, and they're enacting the episode, and you can go back and forth with them and interact with them, well, that's kind of like the holodeck.
Yeah, and then you can change the scenery too. You can let's go play some golf.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically, it's going to be incredible, and all the tech to do it is here. So part of why we're building up the company.
How excited are you for Apple's VR set?
I'm pretty excited. I mean, what we're going to be able to do with it, as I just described, I think it's the next phase of how podcasting and content consumption is going to work. You're going to be there.
And is it just a kind of for them, because VR and AR has been done before, but is it more like they got the timing right this time because it's kind of coming off the back of all of this AR or AI and LLM breakthroughs?
I would say so. There's a few factors. Apple's known for not being the first to do. Actually, sometimes they are first to do things, or to exploit certain technologies. Like I think they were the first. Whatever the last version of the floppy disk was, I think they did that. They're also the first to kill it. I think they were the first to adopt USB, but obviously they didn't invent USB. So those are examples of them being first. Also, I don't think they were literally the first to use those small hard drives that became the iPod, but they might have been. So, and there's times when they're definitely not the first, like they weren't the first to make a tablet. But, even when they're not first, they're the first to do an amazing version of it that everybody wants. So, we're going to see what happens with the Vision Pro. Obviously, it's extremely expensive, but I think that between just better execution, which is possible with time, right? Speed, GPU power, all these things solve, battery power, all these things get solved with time, actually. And between that and what's possible now with AI, I think that makes the difference.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I hope I have some reason to buy one of those, because it does seem really, really cool.
I'll give you a reason.
No, totally, man. I think that you've kind of convinced me in this call to have you guys be my podcast host and give it a try for a month at least. And I want to send it to my my family and be like, hey, have a chat with me. I'm sorry I couldn't make it for Christmas dinner. Please have my AI presence instead.
Sure.
Oh man. Is there anything that I forgot to mention, or that you would like to say more?
Not really. I think we covered some great topics. For people that are interested in starting a company, again, like I said, this is just this amazing point in time in terms of what's possible. I wouldn't advise everybody to form a company. It's not for everybody. Some people, 9 to 5, and you know what you have to do, and then your time is your own. That's a perfectly normal thing and respectable thing. But I forget who said this, but founders, something in them is broken. They want to go on hard mode. What's the Elon quote? Chewing glass and staring into the abyss. I will say, like, it's been so like fast and amazing for us that it hasn't actually been like that. It's actually just amazingly exciting. Maybe that's a difference between if you're working on something that's just like booming and going amazingly well versus, you're slogging it out on something very difficult in terms of maybe there's no product market fit. But yeah, if you feel like you want to do a startup, and Jason was making this point on Twitter, like there's no better time than now. Like there's never been a point where Silicon Valley is more accessible through programs like FounderU. So I would just super triple down on that. I want to thank obviously Presh and Kelly for picking us, and Jackie as well for bringing us into the Accelerator, and obviously Jason and the whole team there.
Yeah. Well, wonderful talking with you, Edward. It's been a pleasure, and I'm excited to try out your product myself, and excited to get some great clips of this episode out there too. And we'll have to check in again in a couple months.
Super. Look forward to it.